Hello everyone, it's Mike Levin. Saturday, February 23rd, 2019. And wow, this is my first video in quite some time, I believe. I am here at the pretty amazing Irby residence, walking around, enjoying the remarkable scenery of New York City and Verrazano Bridge, and really just generally counting my blessings. I haven't posted a video in a while because I've been busy, and since the last time I posted, I am now married. You'll be seeing more of Nat as her and I do these YouTube videos together. And I got a moment here, so I figured I'd, just try and get myself back in the habit, back on track. There's really almost no more purpose to the video than that, and I'm not going to edit. Although in the future, there is the prospect of my video production editing quality going up, or actually being present at all, because I really resist video editing, because it is the single most time-consuming portion of this entire process. In fact, I oftentimes listen to the animation gang talk about the YouTube algorithm and how, for their form of content, being a production machine with a reliable audience that tunes in, where you lean into the algorithm of popular, frequently produced content, doesn't work out so well for them, because it takes so long and is nothing but editing. So it gives just freestyle YouTubers a pretty big advantage, and there's some really I guess bottom scrapers, the reactions. And I try and explain it to my kid Addie, who's really into the YouTube culture now, how these people react to videos is just a form of leeching. Well, I mean, it's not terrible, but everyone's a critic, but very few are artists putting themselves out there doing things. And it's really fun to put yourself out there and to do things and to be the original content producer, thinking things through. And I guess I do that just to keep my my foot in the game here, because in the field of search engine optimization, Google's always changing, and it wasn't until several years into SEO that it was so obviously even a Google game, because there were other significant players back then arbitrating web traffic on searches. Today, it's not just that there's one dominant search player, Google, it's that the platforms and channels are all different now. It's no longer all a desktop web game. There's as much attention spent on digital content through mobile now, and through apps through mobile, as there ever was on the web. So it's dispersed over all these different channels, and that adds a lot of challenge and forces my field to sort of undergo yet another evolution or shift, which it's really always undergoing. It's always the same, and it's not a shame. That's life, and I really love adapting to the constantly evolving field of SEO. In fact, it took me a really long time before I even could bring myself to call myself an SEO, because I was a webmaster. I had a difficult time letting go of those jack of all trade days, where it was just very satisfying, professionally, deeply gratifying to do all parts of web publishing, sometimes even the creative content too, but certainly all the technical stuff, and configuring a web server in the days of Microsoft IIS and LAMP. And I was much more on the Microsoft platform, which let me down. The active server page technologies, which have been deprecated, or whatever you want to use the term for, no longer supported as a web technology by Microsoft, probably intelligently, but they went this whole .NET direction, which really let me down and tried to force me to become something I didn't want to become. And And that was all on the tails of the Amiga computer from Commodore back in the day, the video toaster and stuff, where I really fell in love with technology and superior tools, even though it crashed all the time, which was its one big downside. But its upsides all sort of sprung from its downsides. It was that whole thing about, if you want this set of benefits, you've got to take this set of penalties. And because resources were much scarcer those days, you just lived with it, and crashing was not as much of a big deal as it would be today. Completely unacceptable. It's really a sign of a non-professional machine. And now that I've been at the game for a while, I get it. I get why the Amiga never took off and became a mainstream platform. If you can't rely on the hardware and the continuous running, it's not a suitable tool. No matter how much you get for the money, you should just pay that much more and have a machine that doesn't let you down. So hardware matters, and no matter how good something looks, those critical downsides can be long-term downsides, limitations. So I thought I'd jump on the Microsoft bandwagon after the Amiga, and Microsoft let me down. And so I was in this, fool me twice kind of, mode, and very reluctant to take up new things. And eventually my path led me to Python. In fact, it's fair to say my path led me to Python over and over, until finally I was worn down by the sheer appropriateness to the project, availability of client libraries to take care of jobs that just, it's the joke in Python is, import anti-gravity, whoosh, you fly off into the air, because things are really that simple. And I fell in love with the simplicity of Python and got very paranoid about it letting me down, and then got to know the Python community more and more, and where things are going, and exactly how much Python is and what it means for a language to be free and open source, and for this benevolent dictator guy to be sort of guiding the development. But most of the work now is distributed over so many people, and the software is run in so many mission critical locations, that both Python and Linux, an operating system, one of the many code execution environments that can host Python, that's a double whammy win. You get proficient at Python, you get proficient at various code execution environments in which it can run, which sounds kind of unusual and crazy, but all it just means is broad job, applicability for your skills. The more places Python can run easily, the more jobs you'll be qualified for. You can be like, I can do that, be it control of all these systems to, websites to whatever, It's just a machine automation language, and you got to learn one of them to be considered literate anymore these days. And your other choices are just so full of gotchas, too many gotchas, that the stuff is just complex enough, or just vendor specific enough, like money making enough, that you have to be tied to, software upgrade cycles where you pay, or you have to be committed to it from a career perspective to become proficient enough at it to just use it as a casual tool when you need it. That would be difficult to do in, say, Java or one of the .NET languages like C#, but is easy to do in Python. You can just take it up whenever you want. After a while, it just reads in your mind like English. And you have these environments like Jupyter Notebook that make it easy to be coding Python again, because you just install Anaconda. You search on Anaconda, you find the version that's Python 3 point something, usually 3.6. It might be going up to 3.7 now for your operating system, probably 64-bit Windows or Mac. And you install Anaconda, and then you run Jupyter Notebook, and up in your web browser pops this thing where you can just start typing Python code, and you Google up a tutorial or so, and you're in business. Python is a lot like just a calculator, a logic calculator in your head, just a different way of thinking that after you're at it for a while, you stop thinking about it as like some programming language called Python, and just the way you automate, the way you logically iterate through lists and create loops and all this stuff. So where's all this going? I'm as passionate about that as I ever was. I finally have my legs underneath of me again after a number of transitions in life, you know. Just as you think you've got your act together, life deals out something that throws you for a curve, and staying stable, regaining your stable co-orbits with whoever else there is in your life, and getting to a nice position where it's like a ready position. In some martial arts, they have the ready position, where it's just you're standing there with good form in a relaxed state. You have excess capacity to take on things that come up in life, but the idea is to not have to tap your excess capacity. It's exhausting. It's not a great way to live. So become capable of doing almost anything, but only be called upon to do certain things that have high value to interested stakeholders who come to you because you can deliver these things faster, more easily, without a big of a hassle than other people, with a fair qualifications in that you're not building long-term systems. You're scrap and rebuild. You know, you hit data sources, feel your way through a project in Jupyter Notebook, and once you get it right, you can have your answers and turn them around to your, you know, stakeholders. And if it's a one-time thing, then you're done. You walk away from it. But if it's something that needs to be done over and over, you now lift the code up out of Jupyter Notebook and move it over into a .py file, just a standard Python text file on a server, usually a cloud server, into some sort of automation system, which I found the default Linux systemd to be as good as any. No vendor dependence, just the building capabilities of Linux has some really good scheduling stuff. In fact, it's a respawner, it's a task respawner. Check every 5 seconds that this is running. If it's not, rerun it. So as long as you code your Python right, you can be sure your code is always running. Now, if it has a syntax error, it'll quit out, but that's where the master task coming from the respawner is actually just a py file that's importing a schedule module, and then Python takes care of the actual scheduling, and then you can use whatever scheduling API is made available in whichever Python scheduling library you choose. Brilliant. And so in this way, your skills that you develop in Jupyter Notebook, and then you start to refine in a more text-based, text editor-based environment. I'd recommend Vim, although that's the steepest learning curve of everything I recommend. And push the code around this way and that, usually using Git and GitHub, which has all kinds of advantages built into that. There's other things than GitHub. You can use Bitbucket, and it all depends on just, you know, what you're trying to do. One or the other might be appropriate, but then you've got the whole platform that I'm advocating: Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, with a special call out to Jupyter Notebook as a long-term, in the back of your pocket, bare minimum tech literacy you should expect yourself to have, so that you stay viable in this evolving field of search engine optimization, where it's becoming less and less about these title and meta description tweaks and link topography analysis, and it becomes more about hitting this system and that, pulling whatever they have to pull, whatever they have to offer you, knitting it together with data from other sources, generating some sort of report. You know, you apply algorithms and, you know, data models at this point. Very often all your processing is just standard row and column type processing. It feels a lot like SQL relational database work, simple joins and stuff of data from different sources. But at other times, you might tap special libraries like TensorFlow for machine learning, like suggest me a title tag based on these samples and stuff. So anyway, I plan on getting to that point. I'm not quite there, but where I'm at is Pandas, where all that happy stuff that so many people in my field got used to being able to do in a SQL environment, MySQL, and then Oracle buys MySQL, and, you know, SQL itself becomes a little bit less out of vogue because of all these NoSQL tools that are out there. And so what's someone to do in choosing their tools? Well, The answer is, if you're a Python person, you start using the Pandas library, because all that SQL type stuff that you got used to doing and you miss because you don't have an expensive installation somewhere, or this fat software running on your laptop, also on a server somewhere. You can take SQLite. That is sometimes a way to get through it, but then you're always moving data in and out of a database just to do joins between data from different data sources. So then finally, the answer is this Pandas library, which is part of the Anaconda install. So the same thing that gives you Jupyter Notebook on your system also gives you Pandas, which is, it's just, import Pandas as PD typically, and you import NumPy as NP, so you have NumPy's facility there too to do some things that but it provides a whole API. It provides a whole SQL-like API, which is generally in memory database stuff. So you draw some table here, some data here, have it in table A. They call it data frame under Pandas. And you draw some data here, another data frame. And then you do merges and joins between them using the standard, inner, outer, left, right sort of stuff to control the join, and with commands and API a lot like SQL. So you're doing all this SQL stuff without SQL, and you incur very low tech liability. You generally don't try and save data locally. It's always a bad idea to try and do long-term warehousing of data at your own expense for some application that needs that forever into the future. Just get database out of the picture. Store no more data than what fits into a Google spreadsheet, plus a few tabs, not heavyweight data tabs, but a few tabs of tables in that Google sheet. You can usually stuff some data into there. If you're trying to get some trending feature, trending is the hardest thing to do when I'm talking about be lightweight with your data. But if you can requery it again from the source, don't try and warehouse it locally. It's just so much better to write your things to requery from source. Tons of DBA type people would disagree, but I think this is the world that we're going into, where if the vendors are able to give you data over the date range API going back in time farther, you should just write your stuff to draw against, repolling the date range data when you need it, and creating that report. That way you never have anything to fix or make sure is in place. You just run your script and it works. So we don't always have the luxury of doing that. So there's all these 80-20 rules to mitigate the reports and the data and the functionality you're trying to deliver to the stakeholders, and how much tech liability you really want to incur. And there's this perfect balance usually between the two. Just don't promise trending and those little spark lines and you'll generally be okay. Or if you do promise that, make sure all your data sources let you requery those date ranges in the past, and you're not being asked to create an Amazon S3 data cache or anything, because complexity of projects multiplies as soon as there's long-term significant data retention, persistence involved. There's even legal stuff involved. So just requery from data source, and let's see, be able to do that just generally when the need comes up. Hit data sources to be able to deal with all the authentication issues that come up. There's all kinds of data sources to hit. Data feeds, real-time feeds, things that have real simple APIs where you just send a URL, using the GET method, and you get simple data back that's easy to parse. And then there's APIs where you have to send complex requests, where you build these JSON data objects, and it's you got to use the post method, and it's part of the post payload, and the data that comes back is a complex JSON object that you need to understand how to parse. Well, the parsing is usually automatic. You need to understand the schema where things can be found inside of it so you can steer your way into the data. One of the most exciting things going on in the field right now, and I think I'll wrap it up because this just hit 20 minutes, is Chrome automation. Google has recently just made Chrome a tool that you can just generically control with scripts, headlessly. So you can put Chrome running on an Amazon headless server and have it do automated tasks as if it were a user. And this opens the door to a whole bunch of automations that were not off limits in the past, required a large and strange commitment to make work. You'd either have to use Firefox with Selenium or something like it. So nothing wrong with that, except you're off the mainstream with a browser and you're using software whose API is mostly made for testing and stuff. You need to become a Selenium person, which at first sounds good, but 80-20 rule. What's available now with Chrome through the Puppeteer library is just the ability to issue very simple commands, a very simple, straightforward script file. They are hardwired to Chrome, but come on, when you're doing this sort of work, you're not necessarily going for cross-browser compatibility. Although I guess in some scenarios you might want to run an automated script with Chrome, but then with Firefox, etc. But then you're in the testing world. I'm not talking about testing things. I'm talking about stupid data tricks, the repositioning of yourself in the field of search engine optimization, often as a technical webmaster, into a similar technical field that I'm calling data mastering in the spirit of webmastering. Because I enjoyed the webmastering world back when that was the thing. Being a jack of all trades has a satisfying feel to it. It's nice to know a little about everything and to do projects that require that, which would otherwise take large unwieldy teams, but you just pull it off like it's no big deal, and people really appreciate that. So the return of something like data mastering, of something like webmastering, but I'm calling data mastering, that just in broad terms, it can be a lot of things, but I'm promoting it as a Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. A little Linux, a lot of Python, maybe Vim, and definitely Git, and the text-based interface when you can, but that's sort of aspirational. That's what you're working towards. Jupyter Notebook to start out, and you tuning in here to follow what I'm going to be doing along these lines, teaching you this platform, along with my wife Natalie, who you'll be getting to know as I bring her along on my journey into this technical stuff with some things that I mean to publish, because even though I'm a clock puncher and I work for the man, and it's a wonderful way to live here in New York City because it's a great job market, and as long as your skills are the right skills, not running your own business and just being the shaggy man on the, across the way from the Emerald City here is certainly suits me. I wouldn't run my own company, if I could help it, which is exactly what I'm doing. So punching the clock and applying my skills as work for hire for my employer. So I'm not generally doing a lot of money-making things on the side, but as working for a publisher, being in the publishing industry, being an SEO who needs to be this jack of all trades, knowing a little bit of everything sort of person, you need to have some skin in the game. You need to be out there and doing things. So I publish on these channels like YouTube here so that I can see what it's like, so that I'm exposed to the cultures and the tools and the ecosystems, So when I have the time, on weekends like this, I'll do these walks and talks about this topic or that, and then I'll be looking at some way to monetize it. Maybe some premium content, maybe a subscription thing, maybe Patreon. I've said this before, but the time is coming, because when I sit down and I put the real effort into it, more than just talking off the cuff about it, I think there'll be some of the better content out there helping people navigate their way through this crazy field of tech, where there are so many rabbits to chase down different rabbit holes, and the odds are you're going to choose a few of the wrong ones, and you're going to waste and burn a few years this way and that. And I'm asking for the very minimal investment, the very least that one can put in. It's the easiest language to learn on the most pervasive automation platform out there, and the most free of the tools, the most widely supported and accessible by noobs, the most capable of carrying you the long distance and being applicable to situations. It's the true 80-20 rule solution, with components that I finally have found my way to and actually found to be love-worthy. Let's call them love-worthy. As much as I love the Amiga now, I'm loving the tools that I'm using. And I have just the right levels of independence from vendors at different places. And even though I do partake in proprietary tools, I like with me my Microsoft Surface Book. Surface Book 2, I think it's called. It's just a portfolio format thing, and it's just a delight to work on. And muscle memory starts to kick in. You remember where things are. You're working on the same keyboard every day. So I plan on talking about the hardware advantage, everything independence, yet taking advantage of proprietary things, usually in hardware and systems like the Apple environment. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the best you can get right now, and making the best use of tools, not letting dogma and religion inhibit you from using the power tools that you want when you need them, but avoiding dependency on the power tools, especially when they come with a very expensive price tag. And then just generally being a highly capable carpenter of the tech industry, a nice blue-collar worker of infotech. I'm not talking about getting your printer printing. I'm talking about getting data sources and putting the resulting data through the correct processing to become actionable, so that you're adding value to people's processes and life and the company you work for. That's it. So anyway, thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.